When we talk about making amends and things like this, like the biggest amends we have to make are to ourselves, And why do you think that is? Like, why do you think we're even having this topic of self-forgiveness? Is it just because we kick the shit out of ourselves? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
I can't move forward. Like, and I've seen it in other people too. Like, if you don't forgive, whether it's yourself or another situation, like, you don't move forward. It's the greatest time machine in the world, because I remember prior to working the steps and moving through the process of the amends in the 12 steps, step 9, step 8, and step 9, I could go back to a situation and it's just emotionally like I'm fucking like it just happened, right, man. I could go back to a painful situation and I could smell the room. I could feel the intensity in the air. I could relive the emotions in such detail that it's like it just fucking happened, man. And I wasn't moving forward. There was a lot of wasted potential inside that inability to forgive, and that's why it's such an important thing to do, is to let that shit go. And then when it's directed itself, like then there's self-harm involved with it also.
Yeah. Well, and it's because, I mean, the likely thing that I just turn to immediately is like, how can I forgive somebody else if I can't forgive myself? Like, because the things that I'm holding against myself, are they things that I would forgive somebody else for?
Yeah, always.
Yeah. I mean, really, so like, why do I have this morbid self-reflection? Why do I have this tendency to want to look backwards and just hate myself for it? And it's a part of the disease, right?
Right.
It's a part of the ism today. It's sort of how it manifests itself in my life today, because if I can feel just bad enough about myself, maybe I'll take a drink.
Maybe a drink will help.
Yeah, maybe something will help. So it is crucial. It is important, and it is one of those things that I personally don't think that I ever stop figuring out. Like, sometimes I think I will have, forgiven myself for something. In my case, like I had a relapse after 18 months that wasn't my drug of choice. It wasn't alcohol. And it sort of came out of nowhere. It was really only like a one-day event, and
I know the story, but what happened?
Yeah. Okay. Well, so I was on Adderall for a large chunk of my life, and I was on Adderall in recovery, and for ADD as prescribed, and I never abused it. I always just took it as prescribed.
You're one of those anomalies that.
Yeah, well,
you never did abuse it.
Right, and I didn't even like it. I didn't like that I had to take it. Like, I just knew that I had a job at the time that I absolutely hated, and I knew that if I didn't take it and went to work, that I would leave work. That's if I made it at all, because I just couldn't stand being there. And, it sort of gave me the ability just to sit there and concentrate on my job and just do what I need to do, right? But I went back to school because I was trying to get out of that job. And when I was in school, I had so one of the things that I did in sobriety is I started taking all my medication as prescribed. Like when I because I'm on depression medication as well. And so I would take all these things the way that the doctor was actually telling me to do them. And that included my ADD medicine, because prior to, I would take it in the morning and I wouldn't take it on the weekends just because I didn't like it, So then I started taking it as prescribed, which was like, 10 milligrams in the morning and 10 milligrams in the afternoon, or 10 milligrams. I think it was like 6 hours later, or whatever the case was. And so I would take that medicine regularly. And then when I was in school, I had a lot of moments where, I was in school full time and working full time. I had specific assignments that were due for finals, and it would require me to like be up all night, right? So what I found myself doing was I would take the Adderall as prescribed, which was one pill every such amount of hours. And so because I was still awake during those hours, I would just continue to take it. And what happened was there was just one instance, and I think I was 16 months sober at this point. There was one instance where I must have taken 2 doses like too close to each other or something, right? But I just noticed that I was actually starting to feel the effects of the Adderall, which I'd never, ever felt before in my life. And I was just like, whoa, that's kind of scary, because for me, like, to have any mind altering anything in sobriety is kind of a strange sensation. And so like I was honest with everybody. I was still in a counseling group at that time, like an aftercare program for the treatment program that I was with. And I told those guys, and I told my sponsor, and everybody just sort of, said, well, what was your motive? Your motive wasn't to get high, And so I was like, okay, like, well, it sounds like it's, like, it's probably okay. Like, don't do it again, obviously. But then what I found was I was like looking for these instances where I had to pull an all-nighter again, and then I just had one instance where I was like, well, what I had decided was I just needed to come off of it. It didn't matter, because I was trying to quit that job anyways. And so it was like, I need to come off of it, and I'm going to quit this job anyways, and I'll just deal with it however it works out, like, let the chips fall where they will. And for some reason, like, me sort of putting that idea in my head that I was going to come off of it must have been like, but then what, right?
Right.
So I had one last prescription with it, and I had one day where I think out of 30 pills, I took like 10, and then I flushed the rest down the toilet and was like, I'm done with it forever. And I eventually, I wasn't sure what to call that, because it was like, it wasn't my drug of choice. It wasn't alcohol. And I really struggled for a long time to like sort of identify, like, well, I don't want to call it a relapse, because that 18 months was just so precious to me. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I was just worried that I was, if I called it a relapse, then I would actually go out and do all the things, all the alcohol and all the opioids in my case, that I wanted to do, and that didn't happen, and I eventually like came to the conclusion, like, yes, it's a relapse. Like, I started my time over, which was difficult for me, and I really thought that I don't even think I realized that I needed to forgive myself for it till a ways down the road, till I saw that it was still affecting me. Like
a couple years, right?
Yeah, like I didn't even count time. I reset my time, but I wasn't like, okay, now I'm at 30 days. Like, now I'm at 60. Like, I didn't even count time until I think I got to about like 9 months. And then I was like, okay, it's been 9 months.
Yeah.
And yeah, it took me a long time. Like, I remember I talked to you about it like quite a bit. And I was like, dude, I don't think I've ever like just gotten over that.